Hey guys, Chris Dick here. Today we're going to continue our series in setting up virtual machine networks on Microsoft Azure. Now, in the last part, we created our name node, and that is basically going to be the main machine that's going to control other machines in this network. Um, the they all these machines will essentially function the same way, but when we install other products on here, I'm going to be installing a few other things on here on the name node that will control the rest of the systems in parallel. And in particular, I'll be using it as a Hadoop system. But that's out of scope for this video. So today what I'm going to be focusing on here is adding additional machines to our virtual machine network. Okay. Now, right now, my name node is up and running. You'll want to check that status. Okay. Make sure that if you're not using your virtual machines, shut them down as quick as possible. Don't incur cost when you don't need to. It can add up very easily. Although the machine cost for this particular size of machine is fairly inexpensive, why incur the cost if you don't need to? Now, something else to think about is we right now we have a public IP address, and if you've watched the last video, because I shut down my machine and I've restarted it, it's now issued me a new public IP address. So this is something very important. So if you remember, we also set up a WinSCP session, and because we set up that WinSCP session with the old IP address, we're also going to have to change the new IP address. So this can be a little bit cumbersome if you're setting up many virtual machines, maybe hundreds of virtual machines. You would have other ways of doing that, but we're going to be setting up a small network, so it's not too time consuming to reset your public IP addresses. So let's get started by adding a new virtual machine here. So we're going to click on the create button again, and it's the same process as last time, but because we did a few other things last time for the first time, we don't have to do them again, such as setting up the resource group. We already have a resource group that we called virtual machines. This time though, I'm going to call this data node 001. Okay, the last time we called it name node. This will be data node 001. You can imagine if I was setting up more than 100 machines, this naming convention would at least allow me to have 999 machines before I'd have to change that convention. So right now we're not going to be creating that many, but we're going to be creating just one or two here in this case. My region, I'm going to stay with the Canada East. It's not important to choose this. However, if you're running in production, you do want to think about your location and how these machines are communicating to each other. Most likely, if this is setting up on a rack somewhere, it should be in the same proximity for speed of access between the nodes. That's going to be very important. So we've got our Canada East here. Our image is going to be Ubuntu Server 20.04 LTS Gen 1. Again, there's many to choose from. I'm going with the Gen 1 for this example because I've tested it many times. However, you can choose whatever one you like. In this case, we're working off Ubuntu, so the commands will be off Linux Ubuntu. The size is again, it's a standard B1S server, and that's showing that it's about $10.84 per month. So pretty inexpensive. You can imagine you could run a decent little system off this without having to buy a full laptop to run it. So that's not bad. So if you wanted to do something like that, you could certainly do it. Now, if we go down here and talk about the administrative account. The last time we chose a username of Ubuntu, so I'm going to keep consistent with that. The SSH key resource or source is one we've already used, so that's going to be important. We just have to look in here for our SSH key pair, and that's the one that we set up in the last video. So if you don't have that, watch the first video and you'll see how that happens. In the inbound ports, we're definitely going to want SSH. In subsequent videos after this, we're going to set up SSH connections to the systems. So stay tuned for that. Next, we go into our disks. We don't need the premium SSD, so I'm going to go with the standard SSD, just like we did before. Networking, this is pretty straightforward, and this is something that you want to think about here. Make sure that when you set up your subnet, you're going to set up your subnet on the same same network essentially. So if we're looking at the virtual network, you'll see that I'm in the virtual machines VNet. And again, this was set up automatically for us the last time we did this. And it's good to just keep these clusters in the same network. Okay. The subnet, however, will be issuing the IP addresses to us. So that will also be very important. The network security group is basic at this point. Now, the network security group is going to be very important in later parts of these videos. Right now, we're just issuing SSH commands, but we might set up a remote desktop. In fact, I'm pretty sure I might do that. And there's a whole bunch of other ports that we will open. And again, because I'm setting up a Hadoop system, there will be web interface ports that I'll set up that'll be able to access the virtual machines that way as well through their web interfaces. So the public IP address, as I said, we're going to allow SSH, and I think everything is good to go from there. Click on to management. Now, just like we did the last one, I enabled auto shutdown, and I'm going to make that 11:59. Change that. 11:59. I'm going to set my time zone to Eastern, and I do that because one time, not too long ago, I was doing some work and it shut down my virtual machine while I was doing the job and kind of messed me up. So, and that was because it wasn't in the same time zone, and I was assumed that it was going to be shutting down when I needed it. Again, it will send me a notification if it's needing to shut down, and then for guest OSs, we're not going to worry about anything else there. In the advanced section, nothing to worry about here. Pretty much, it's the same stuff that we would always have just as default. Tags, nothing to do here as well. Let's go to review and create. Now, I do always want to emphasize the cost of the machine. The cost of the machine is going to display here. Be cautious about what you've chosen here. All right. As a new user, sometimes it's tempting to just go for the best as you're setting these things up. You do not need the best to set these up. It's not important for what we're trying to accomplish. Obviously, in a production scenario, you're going to want to test out what choices are going to be the best for your situation. So that's going to be really important to think about. As we look through here, it looks like we've all got everything that we need. It's all exactly what we expected to be doing. So we'll just click on create. Okay. Now I'm going to close this as it's creating, and let's go over to our virtual machines. And by the way, if you don't have virtual machines sitting on your dashboard like this, all you have to do is just type virtual. In fact, VIR will do, and just click on virtual machines. Eventually that button will appear on your dashboard. I'm just going to choose the resource group that we're working on right now and apply. You'll notice that our new data node isn't there yet because it's still creating. But let's, while it's creating, let's try to connect to our name node, because this is going to be the same process that we're going to do with the data node. Notice, as I mentioned, the IP address has changed. So let's go to the name node, and we're going to copy that IP address. I'm going to load up Winscp, and I have to change my name node. If you remember, we set this up in the last part. So this is fairly simple. We just type in the IP address here, and that's all we had to do. We didn't have to change anything else. There's nothing with the private keys that we set up before. It's only the IP address that changes. Okay. Now, the next thing that we're going to be doing, because we also have this new data node, so we're going to click on here. You want to click on the item here, and we're going to duplicate this or clone this connection session. So you just click on clone to new site, and you'll notice it automatically clicks onto or selects the new site. And we're going to go over to our dashboard again, and we'll just click on refresh. And you'll see, and again, I'll select my resource group, and you'll see that it's sitting right there. We have an IP address for that as well. So let's click over here, click to clipboard, and we'll paste that. Okay. Now, if you remember, just so you're familiar with what I've done here, we created that PPK file in the last video. Okay, that was our first video in this series. So if you don't know what that is, watch that video. It's very helpful to get you started here. So we save that. It's going to ask me for a name. In this case, because I've already got a data node 001 in my video folder here, I'm just going to give it a name like that, _2, just to be sure. Okay. Now, in order to connect to it, just like we did the last time, we just click on login. We accept the certificate, and we should be into our Ubuntu system. Okay, so that's our data node 1. If I do the PuTTY session again, I should be able to ls into, let's say, SSH. Okay, tells me what's in the SSH folder. That's something we're going to be working on over the next little while, is SSH, because we want to be able to connect to our other systems. So let's just do one more thing before we close off this session. We want to make sure that we can connect to our name node as well. We'll click on login, and we connect. We still have that stuff folder that we created last time. And we'll see if we can connect through PuTTY, and we can. We'll try to do a ls to tell me what's in the SSH folder. Okay, there we have it. Same things. We have the authorized keys, and we're all pretty good here. So what we have done so far, I'm going to close down Winscp. So what we've done in this video here is we've set up an additional system, or an additional virtual machine on our network. Okay, right now the two can't talk to each other. This is like two laptops sitting in the same office. They can't talk to each other yet unless you allow it. The next video will be about connecting those machines via SSH. We're going to talk about config files. We're going to talk about using our PEM file that we created, our private key file, and giving our hosts some names that are related to their IP addresses as well. So stay tuned for the third part in this series. Looking forward to seeing you again sometime, guys. Enjoy your day. Remember to like and subscribe. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.